Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Joke Rogers. A Russian missile has hit a 5-story building in Ukraine's southern city of Zaporizhzhia, killing at least 4 people and leaving at least 8 others wounded. According to Ukraine's prosecutor's office, 5 people are still missing, including a child. The upper floors of the apartment block had been destroyed and cars parked nearby crumpled. The State Emergency Service said in a statement that 11 people have been rescued from parts of the building that collapsed. It adds that rescue efforts are underway for more survivors trapped under the debris. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says forces are keeping all sections of the front under control. The president said that cities on the front line were being shelled by Russia in a deliberate terror. Speaking during his nightly address, Mr. Zelensky said that every Ukrainian had felt the difficulty of providing energy through the harsh winter.
We are keeping each sector of the front under control. There were reports on this situation during the day from the military units of Khortytsia, Tavria, Odessa, North. In addition to the directions of the front, attention is also paid to the frontline territories, to those cities and districts that are under Russia's shelling every day and night, under deliberate terror. Nikopol and other communities of the region, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and the region, the frontline part of Donbass, Kharkiv, Sumy region, Chernihiv region. The winter is over. It was very difficult. And without exaggeration, every Ukrainian felt this difficulty. But still, we managed to provide Ukraine with energy and heat.
And top prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, has visited Ukraine to investigate Russia's campaign of missile and drone attacks on power and other infrastructure, which killed hundreds of civilians and left millions with no electricity or water. He says parties involved in the military conflict must distinguish between civilian objects and military objectives, and that attacks on civilian objects are forbidden. The ICC in The Hague has jurisdiction to prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide on the territory of Ukraine committed on either side, and is expected to focus on high-profile suspects.
I know that there are a lot of different war crimes, and of course we want justice and bring all these guilty people to all of them, but I think that the priority for our people, it's about our future generation.
But we've been to one of the power stations that were hit, and this is another example that in the cold of November of last year, 8 people were killed, and I think 4 or 6 children were badly injured when a missile hit this apartment block, and we need to find out what pattern, if any, is demonstrated by that, because these are not isolated occurrences. There seems to be a lot of damage in Ukraine, and it may well be that it's part of a policy or part of a plan, and we need to get to the bottom of it and see whether or not there's criminal responsibility, and if there is, we have an international criminal court that has jurisdiction to look into it. And I think what people want are not Pyrrhic victories. I'm not, as a prosecutor, we are officers of the court. We're not here to get a round of applause by a conjuring trick. Whatever we produce, whatever findings we make, whatever step we take, has to be guided by an imperative of reliable and probative evidence. And whenever we do move, your viewers, your readers should have the confidence that this is not a political process.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has urged China not to send weapons to help Russia's war in Ukraine. Instead, He wants Beijing to exert pressure on Moscow to pull back its forces. In a speech to the German parliament, Mr. Scholz said it was disappointing that Beijing had refrained from condemning the Russian invasion, though he welcomed its efforts towards nuclear de-escalation. His remarks underscored how the international response to the war in Ukraine highlighted global divisions, with China and India refraining from condemning the invasion. The U.S. is sounding out close allies about the possibility of imposing new sanctions on China if Beijing provides military support to Russia for its war against Ukraine. And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called on foreign ministers from the group of G20 nations to find common ground on global issues as he inaugurated a meeting that looks set to be dominated by Russia's year-long war in Ukraine. India, which holds the presidency of the bloc this year, declined to blame Russia for the war and has sought a diplomatic solution while sharply boosting its purchases of Russian oil. European and U.S. delegates have, however, reiterated that they hold Russia responsible for the conflict. The foreign ministers' meeting is being attended by 40 delegations, including those headed by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang.
You are meeting at a time of deep global divisions. As Foreign Minister, it is but natural that your discussions are affected by the geopolitical tensions of the day. We all have our positions and our perspectives on how this tension should be resolved. However, at the leading economies of the world, we also have a responsibility toward those who are not in this room. We should not allow issues that we cannot resolve together to come in the way of those we can.
In considering these issues, we may not always be of one mind. In fact, there are some matters of sharp differences of opinions and views. Yet, we must find common ground and provide direction, because that is what the world expects of us. The longer we put it off, the more the credibility of multilateralism stands.
In the meantime, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has accused Moscow of repressing domestic critics and called on UN-mandated investigators to keep documenting Russia's alleged abuses in the Ukraine war in a speech to the Human Rights Council. Mr. Blinken described Russia's civil society crackdown as a systematic muzzling and called on national and international efforts to hold perpetrators accountable.
Governments that commit atrocities abroad are also likely to violate the rights of people at home. And that's exactly what Russia is doing. The Russian government now holds more than 500 political prisoners. In January, it shuttered the Moscow-Helsinki Group, one of the last human rights organizations still allowed to operate in the country. The government's systematic muzzling of independent voices in Russian civil society makes the work of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the country even more important. This council has played a crucial role in shining a spotlight on Moscow's horrific and ongoing abuses, including through the creation of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine. The COI's first report in October concluded that Russia has committed war crimes and violations of international humanitarian law. As long as Russia continues to wage its war, the COI should continue to document such abuses, providing an impartial record of what's occurring, and a foundation for national and international efforts to hold perpetrators accountable. The Iranian regime is also once again cracking down on citizens demanding their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Since the killing of Mahsa Amini in September brought Iranians of all ages out into the streets, the regime has killed at least 500 people, imprisoned tens of thousands more, many of whom have been tortured, according to human rights groups. In November, the Council came together to create an independent fact-finding mission to investigate Iran's human rights violations. We must ensure the team can do its work.
Please make your way to the main
On the other hand, Polish Climate Minister Anna Moskwa says democratic countries worldwide should make Russia pay war reparations to Ukraine and cut all financial and economic ties with it. Ms. Moskwa believes that democratic states must learn a lesson from Russia's war in Ukraine in 2014, after which she said they continued business as usual with the Russian Federation. The meeting of Partnership for Transatlantic Energy and Climate Cooperation gathered government officials and private investors from the United States and Europe to discuss how to help Ukraine rebuild its energy grid and switch to clean energy.
The U.S. believes public-private partnerships are critical to combat the global climate crisis. We'll depend heavily on the innovation, the dynamism of our private sector. It's critical that we work with the private sector to develop and deploy cutting-edge technologies to decarbonize every facet of our economy. This can't be done by government alone. It requires the partnership, the engagement of industry.
We are living in a world where, again, energy is a weapon. But London, as we all know, the weapons can be tools too. And that's the transformation that we need to have. That weapon that has been laid bare during this last year can be a tool. It's a tool for integration, for better collaboration, and I think the transatlantic partnership is a shining example of that.
We need to get Ukraine compensated from Russian Federation as much as possible and over. It should be decent compensation for everything, for energy infrastructure, for every single human being, for environment, for whatever what was destroyed and affected. And
CE's overall mission of financing and risk management tools to help us realize this.
We also understand that the renewables is the quick answer, which should be realized as quickly as we can, because that is the issue of decentralization. So we achieve this goal if we let's say install more renewables. And from the other side, that is also very important from the military threats, that it's very difficult, even from let's say military targets, to target so many stations renewables if they are all around the country. In the future, in fact, we see the mix of generation in Ukraine that is half nuclear and half renewables.
The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins me now from Kiev. Anna, good to see you today.
Good evening.
Right, so give us an update on the Russian missile strike in the southern city of Zaporizhzhia.
Yes, so today over the night, another tragic event happened in the city of Zaporizhzhia. I would just remind that Zaporizhzhia itself has a very special and very important location because it's located very close to the city of Enerhodar, which is in Zaporizhzhia region, and this is where the biggest European nuclear power plant is located, and it is currently under Russian control. So the city itself, the city of Zaporizhzhia, is under very high risk for all these past months, and it's actually experiencing a lot of shelling. But today over the night, a tragic, really horrific and tragic event happened. A Russian missile hit the residential building in the city center. So as we see from the footage, the building is almost completely destroyed. There are just like one block is still standing, but it doesn't really look like it's possible to live in there anymore. What we know for the moment that 3 people were confirmed dead, and some other bodies might be still under the rubble. We also know that 6 people were rescued and were wounded, including a pregnant woman, and 11 were also rescued from under the rubble. Still, according to the local authorities, 9 people considered missing. Rescue operation is still ongoing, and rescue team still has a hope that these 9 people might be still alive, being under the rubble. So rescue team is doing everything possible to get them out and to find them alive. But again, the rescue operation is still ongoing, and it's approaching soon. It's approaching 24 hours. So we will see how all this will end.
So Russia says that the strikes are legitimate and they are aimed at weakening the enemy's military, but Ukraine casts them as a means of, intimidating ordinary people. How legitimate can attacking civilians and infrastructure be?
Well, it's really difficult to comment on that because, it's residential building. It's a building where children, women, men, civilians, like elderly people, pets are living, and people were sleeping at that point of time. It was late at night, so it's really difficult to comment on that. Considering also that this is not the first time that this happens. We remember what happened in the city of Dnipro. We remember what happened in the city of Kyiv when drone hit the residential building as well, and also a lot of people died, including pregnant women. So it's really something that cannot be really explained from military perspective, because and I was talking a lot to civilians from different areas of Ukraine, and when they are asked this question, when I ask them this question, like what they think about this, they say, well, this is something that we never saw like in the movies, in terms of, the war itself. Usually it's like army against army. At least this is what most of people knew before. But here, and I mean, not only in Ukraine, we see this around the world, that it happens when residential areas are under attacks, and this is exactly what happened here today. And so, of course, it's really difficult to comment on what is the reason for this heat, especially when such heats are direct heat. So it's not debris that was, in this particular case, it was not a debris, it was a direct heat by the missile.
Ukrainian military says it's not planning to withdraw from Bakhmut despite, Russian advances. Do you think Ukrainian forces are holding its ground in the city?
Well, for the moment, what we hear from Ukrainian official sources and also from the soldiers who are on the ground, that Ukrainian soldiers keep their positions in the city of Bakhmut. Situation is extremely difficult. So the battles are happening non-stop, and the battles are happening already in the outskirts of the city itself, even in the city, but yeah, like at the outskirts, basically. We know also that all civilians have been evacuated. Still, there are some civilians who left and who stay there and who don't want to leave their homes. But mostly the city is full of soldiers, and Ukrainian soldiers keep their positions, keep their front line and defense lines inside of the city. What we're hearing from Ukrainian officials, from President Zelensky, from military, is that for this point of time, Ukrainian forces continue their defense of the city, and for the moment, the plan is that Ukrainians will stay there for as long as it's needed. Again, situation is changing very fast, and of course, we do not have like operational information from the inside, so we just have this post factum official comments from Ukrainian officials. So for the moment, situation is as following. So according to the Ukrainian General Staff, President Zelensky, and Ukrainian Ukrainian army keep their positions in there, and very heavy battles continue. Russian forces from other side continue to intensify the assault, continue to bring more manpower. And we also hear that Russian forces have certain success in terms of this assault, but still Ukrainian forces for the moment manage to keep the positions.
So, Anna, it's alleged that, Russia has so far committed more than 70,000 war crimes, resulting in the deaths of thousands of people and destruction of many cities, and forced millions of Ukrainians to become refugees. How are Ukrainians coping and picking up the pieces?
Well, yes, unfortunately, these numbers are just horrible, and what we've seen from different parts of Ukraine, again, and especially from the deoccupied areas, this is something that really hard to believe, especially for Ukrainians. And of course, it's painful. So even for those who live, for example, in Kyiv, it's always painful to hear such kind of news from Kharkiv or Dnipro or Mariupol, which is still occupied, but everyone's seen the footage from the city. It's like a huge city that was, well, in fact, was almost completely destroyed. Of course, it's difficult, and of course, people are, people are very sad about that. But at the same time, people understand that, well, this is a price that Ukrainians are paying for the future freedom, for the future well-being of the future generations. It's really sad that this is the price to pay. However, and so many people have already died. However, this is the fact, and Ukrainians are trying to deal with that and to kind of adopt to such, to such things, to such conditions, and to continue to live on, because, well, apparently, this is the only way for them now to adopt and to continue to fight, to live on, because otherwise all these losses, all these destructions would be for nothing. So I think this is the main message when I talk to people and ask them about this. I think that this is the main message, that we have to, so people say that we have to continue to live in order to, to bring better life to that areas, and to overcome this for the future.
Right, Anna, thanks again, and please continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Welcome back, and now to wrap up the Russian invasion segment, let's take you back to the surreal moment. Supporters, well-wishers, and international allies gathered in their various cities to condemn Russia's military operation in Ukraine, and as well celebrate the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion. While some are hopeful that Ukraine will emerge victorious in the war, others are counting the losses, mourning their loved ones, and reflecting on the impact of the war.
Just like a ticking clock, it's now 1 year since Russia invaded its neighbor Ukraine in what it calls a special military operation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion with a moment of silence and words of gratitude. On a cold, cloudy morning in Kyiv, the 45-year-old addressed members of Ukraine's armed forces and a small gathering of personalities at St. Sophia's Square next to the green and gold-domed cathedral that is a symbol of the city's resilience. As he has done throughout the war, Zelensky showed his emotions in a 30-minute ceremony, holding back tears as he gave out Hero of Ukraine awards to troops and to relatives of soldiers who had been killed. Meanwhile, a ceremony took place at a training base near Salisbury to mark 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukrainian and British soldiers lined up alongside one another and were blessed by a Ukrainian Orthodox priest. A moment of silence was also held during the ceremony, which also saw the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Vadim Pristoyko, make an address.
We're humbled to be here with you today, and seeing all of you with different uniforms, different badges, sometimes even English is different. We are very happy to be here And the most happy of us, the soldiers, our soldiers who came here all the way from Ukraine, who are trained, prepared, and will get this knowledge back to their nation, to be able to save it, to liberate it. This day, and all the days where you are with us, all this year, we're defending not only our nation, which is worth defending, believe me, it's beautiful, and we have to defend it because we're also doing it for all of us, for our values, for our shared ideas, for humanity. Thank you for being with us all this time.
Britain's King Charles praised the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people on the one-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In a statement released by Buckingham Palace, the British monarch said it was heartening the UK and Western allies are doing everything possible to help Ukraine during the conflict. King Charles met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier in February during his trip to the UK, France and Belgium to raise support for Ukraine's war effort. Crowds gathered at London's Trafalgar Square in solidarity with Ukraine. The protesters, some carrying Ukrainian flags, and unfurled a huge banner. Similarly, crowds filled the streets outside the Russian consulate in New York, waving the Ukrainian flag and holding a candlelight vigil to decry the war in Ukraine. Demonstrators included former Russian politician Arkady Yakotsky, who had been jailed in Russia. People in Sydney held a candlelight vigil at a large rally in support of Ukraine. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese calls on Russia to withdraw its troops from Ukraine.
But today, on this time where it is 1 year since this illegal invasion, we again say to President Putin, stop this war now. Withdraw your forces now. This is an unprovoked attack. No one is threatening Russia. No one is threatening Russia's sovereignty. There is no need for you to continue this war, which is causing damage not just to the people of Ukraine, but to those Russian soldiers who are being sent to the front line.
Since the conflict began, Australia has deployed soldiers to Britain to help train Ukrainian troops there and has sanctioned more than 1,000 Russian individuals and entities. However, the iconic Sydney Opera House was illuminated in blue and yellow in support of Ukraine. Lights on the Opera House sails went dark before turning into the colors of the Ukrainian flag, joining Ukraine's allies around the world to light up landmark monuments in a show of solidarity. Paris lit up the Eiffel Tower in the blue and yellow colors of the Ukraine flag. The illumination marks the first anniversary of the war after Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022.
France is trying to make us feel home.
The European Union lit up its Brussels headquarters in the colors of the Ukrainian flag. The Ukraine war, the biggest land conflict in Europe since World War II, has displaced millions, left Ukrainian cities, towns, and villages in ruins, and disrupted the global economy. Since the start of the conflict, the European Union has welcomed 4 million Ukrainian refugees on its soil and has pledged to spend 67 billion euros in financial, humanitarian, emergency budget, and military support. Protesters in Warsaw demonstrated outside a building using Russian embassy workers to mark the 1-year anniversary of Russia's war against Ukraine. During the early morning demonstration, protesters held up a banner as a siren sounded outside the residential building for embassy workers. But the situation took a dark turn as some Bucha residents are mourning their loved ones instead of celebrating. Mourners paid tribute at the local cemetery to grieve for civilians said to have been killed by the Russian troops during the occupation.